Hey, how you doing? Are you looking for good perennials, good choices for perennials that tolerate shade in Zone 3? Maybe you have a structure that's been built and is now shading an area that used to be sunny, or trees and shrubs are growing up and, um, and shading that area now, or maybe you just want to revamp a shady bed. My back perennial border has become more and more shaded from two large and growing willow trees. Nowadays, I'm always on the lookout for good shade-tolerant or shade-loving perennials that are hardy to Zone 3. I thought maybe we could talk about those today. My name is Sharon. I garden on a large yard in a small town in east central Saskatchewan, Zone 3. Welcome to my Sask Garden. I've already begun changing that previously all sun border into more of a shade and part shade area, specifically dry shade. On the south side of the perennial border, in about the middle of the yard, are two large golden willow trees that continue to grow. And as they grow, that shade is encroaching more and more on the perennial bed. And then on the north side of the perennials that are planted there, there's also a row of chokecherry trees, and there's some shrubs in front of that. And those willow roots are moving this way, and the chokecherry roots are moving this way because that's where I water the most, and so they're attracted to all that. And as a result, they are sucking up all the moisture. Then I'm having to water more and more. Even with watering, it really is kind of a dry area now, and so I want perennials that tolerate shade and are somewhat drought tolerant as well. So as I said, this back perennial border was once in full sun. It is now all shade or dappled shade. The two golden willow trees that I planted as rooted cuttings, barely twigs at the time I planted them, are now big, wide-spreading trees that provide beautiful shade here in the backyard. And here's just a photo from 2006, which was a few years after planting the trees. They had already grown, and but they are massive now. So I'm changing that border slowly. I'm going to let some of the chokecherry bush take over. I've already let some, and I'm going to continue to let it encroach a little bit more, but I'd like to just keep an area sort of in the front and the middle open for perennials. It's hard to control a chokecherry bush once it gets going. It does sucker a lot, suckers up through the shrubs, and I think it would be nice as a natural planting, just letting it go. And I did try that for a bit, but there's too many maple trees and ash trees and dogwood and, oh, you name it. There's all kinds of stuff that wants to take hold in a natural environment like that, and especially one where I water from time to time. And so with the chokecherries as well, they produce a lot of seedlings with the little pits that fall. Each one will turn into a tree. So yeah, it's going to be a smaller area, but at the same time, it's still going to be a shady area. And so, you know, I've just been looking at new cultivars of the old standby favorites just to see if there's anything new and upcoming, and there is, but there's nothing wrong with the old standby favorites either. They're old and standby for a reason, and that's because they are hardy and they do well in Zone 3 garden. So the first one I'll mention is Bergenia, because it really is one of my favorites. It's tough as old boots, that plant. It has thick, leathery leaves. It's not bothered by slugs. Deer apparently don't like them. The grasshoppers aren't eating it. It seems to grow in either sun or shade equally as well. It's drought tolerant as far as I could tell, because I've never babied mine and the patches that I have growing, and they're doing okay. It's the first plant to bloom in my yard, and it sends up these pink spikes above the foliage quite early in May. I guess they would be blooming, and yeah, they're nice. I like them. They're fairly easy to take care of. You just nip off the spent flower heads, they do produce seed. So if you wanted to start more that way, but I don't know why you would, because they're really easy to divide. You just dig up, they're really shallow rooted. You just dig them up and move them somewhere else, and they take quite quickly, and yeah, they're easy to move and divide. There are apparently 25 cultivars, hybrid cultivars of Bergenia, and that surprised me when I read that on Google. I thought maybe there'd be 5 or 6 because well, I guess I've just never seen them, or I've never paid attention before. I do have one hybrid, and I think it's called Red Beauty. It really is very nice. It's nicer than the original one that I have, which I don't even know if it's a name. I think it's just the old regular kind of Bergenia, and I don't even know where I got it, if I bought it or if it was given to me. I have no idea, but I've divided it so many times and I've given away so many that yeah, I really can't remember. It will create a nice big patch if you let it, but like I said, it's easy to divide as well. Anyways, the Red Beauty, the hybrid that I have, is got darker green leaves, which may be a little bit smaller, and they are the blooms are higher, and they're a dark pink, and the stems are quite red. They are on the regular Bergenia as well, but I think they're even more pronounced on this Red Beauty cultivar. It's nice. The blooms seem to last longer, and they're a darker pink. They are also semi-evergreen. They need a good cleanup in the spring, but when the snow comes off, those leaves are still green, still leathery. They may be flattened a bit. Some years they're standing nice and upright, and other years they're flattened a bit. The old leaves from underneath will kind of get dry and a really dark brown. They kind of turn into their own mulch if you just leave them alone. And but you can, you know, get under there and just pull out the dead stuff, or trim away the leaves that look like they're dying, or sometimes they get like brown edges on the top from winter. And so they as soon as they come out of spring, they start pushing new growth as well. Next, of course, there's hosta, and there's so many varieties of hosta. Actually, Google tells me that there are tens of thousands. So if you're a collector, good luck. And there's new cultivars that are hitting the market every year. Most of what I have are the old standard varieties, and I don't pay much attention to the names unless I'm looking for a particular one. Or one new hosta I bought last year was a proven winner called Shadowland Wee, and boy, those curly leaves just made me swoon. I'll be anxious to see how it wintered, because despite my taking great care to make sure it was well watered and well taken care of through the growing season last year, it went into winter not looking as great as I had hoped it would. So fingers are crossed. And then this year, in 2025, I thought maybe I would plant a Princess Wu, I think is what it's called. Empress Wu? Empress Wu. And it's also a proven winner variety. It's supposed to grow massive. In its 4th or 5th year, it's supposed to have very large leaves and can be up to 5 feet tall. I doubt that would happen in a Zone 3 environment, and particularly in my yard, where after they're established, I don't water them, you know, too regularly. Only if it's been dry for an extended period of time, then I'll set the sprinkler on them. But I don't know that Empress Wu would do this in my yard, as I said, but I'm willing to give it a try. And wouldn't that be impressive to see a big 5 foot by 5 foot with great big leaves that looks quite tropical? That would look pretty nice. I don't know, maybe someone out there has grown it. It hasn't been out for that long, maybe a couple years. I think it was 2023 Hosta of the Year. So maybe it came out in 2022, I'm not sure. But yeah, chime in if you have this growing in your yard and how it's doing. You know, hosta really are a great plant for zone 3. They do add a bit of a lushness, a tropical feel. There's just something about them that looks really nice, but they do have one downfall. Actually, probably a couple downfalls. One of them is deer. I don't have that problem. Our backyard is fenced. They are also a favorite of slugs, and slugs I have. And I'll just mention here that a good way to get rid of slugs is with an ammonia spray, and that's 1 part ammonia to 9 parts water. And you mix it up in a pump sprayer if you have a big area to do, or else just a hand sprayer. The trick is, though, you have to get the ammonia onto the slug to kill the slug. And as you know, if you have slugs, you know that they feed during the night, and you have to look for them at night, you know, either with a flashlight on your head or something. Then you're swatting mosquitoes. And so I discovered a way, quite by accident actually. I had a piece of wood in the vegetable garden, in my mom's vegetable garden, and I was using it as a place to step. And then I lifted it up one day. She also had slugs in that garden, and we had some wet years then. They were probably everywhere. They were in the grass. They really were everywhere. And so I lifted up that piece of wood. I think it was like a plank, and underneath they were all congregated. There was dozens under this plank, and so that's a good way to give them a hiding spot where they can go during the day. Then you just lift up that plank and you spray the ammonia, put the plank back down, and wait for the next batch. I have also noticed that the thicker leaved hosta, the puckered leaves that are a little bit thicker, the blue leaved ones, or the ones with ribs, but generally the ones that are a little thicker, that they don't seem to be bothered by slugs as much as the thinner leaved. I have one that's like a lance leaf. It's long and narrow, and wow, that plant just gets decimated. That's how I can tell if there's slugs in the garden, because they'll go after that plant first, and that's like the sacrificial plant. I've used the long stems of hosta as well as the stems of Bergenia to wrap a flower bouquet. And you know, the stems, the long stems of hosta as well as the stems of Bergenia, they will last a long time in a vase of water. The next staple for a shade garden will be ferns. That's often recommended. Now, if you grow ferns, and I'm talking ostrich ferns here, you know that they are hell-bent on taking over. They are beautiful and stately, but they want to dominate that flower bed. I've dug up a number of them last year, and I planted them underneath the silver willow on the other side, and actually on both sides of the silver willow. And yeah, I hope they continue their quest for dominance under there. It's a drier area, and ferns like more moist conditions. They're not going to get it back there, and maybe they will until they're well established, but after that I'm not going to water. It's very deeply mulched there. Maybe there will be enough moisture, I'm not sure, but we'll see. Another great perennial for shade is Solomon seal, or polygonatum. And you know, in my opinion, this is the best perennial for dry shade. It is awesome and it's beautiful. It's quite tall. I'm going to say probably 18 inches to 2 feet tall. It does form, it spreads by rhizomes, and it does form a very nice thick colony, and it spreads slowly outward. It's not like super aggressive. It's easy to divide. It's easy to take up some of those rhizomes and plant them somewhere else. I've started doing that with other areas of the yard, particularly under trees. It seems to be a great candidate for doing that. A couple years ago, I also found a variegated Solomon seal, so I bought it, but it's pretty slow growing. It's, well, last year was only year 2, so, you know, first year they sleep, second year they creep, and the third year they leap. So I'm hoping next year to get a few more stems out of that. There is native or wild, and it's a false Solomon seal, and I'm not talking about that one. You know, that's like an ugly cousin or something. It's not very nice in comparison to the Solomon seal that I'm talking about, which here in the photo you can see that it's got these dainty bell-like flowers under the stem, and the foliage is just beautiful. It's a super easy care perennial, and if you have an area that gives you trouble, I'd recommend Solomon seal. They're also a great filler for cut flowers, and the deer don't like them. Also, I've never had slug damage on them. What does like them is the leaf cutter bees, though. They'll take out half circles around them. So most of those that I've mentioned are mostly foliage plants. The next one that I'm going to talk about is Monkshood, or Aconitum napellus, and that one flowers. It's got foliage much like a delphinium, a little bit smaller, finer leaf foliage, but sort of it grows very much like a delphinium, and then it sends up these tall purple, and mine is purple and white bicolor, sort of hooded flowers. And I think that it's seeded out, and because I found some plants that are obviously seedlings from where they were growing, and they're blooming solid purple. So I also have solid purple now, and also out there is a solid white, and there is a solid soft pink color as well. I haven't looked into how many cultivars of monkshood they are, but it is a good candidate for a shady area. It'll bloom more in more sun, but it does bloom in a shady area, and once it's established, it is also quite drought tolerant, or it's tolerant of dry shade for sure. The thing about monkshood is all parts of the plant are toxic, and I have handled it bare-armed, bare-handed. You know, it brushes against my legs when I'm wearing shorts, and I never have any kind of reaction. So I don't know just how toxic it is. I think that toxic means you probably shouldn't eat it. And so if you have children or dogs or cats who like to eat plants, I don't know why they would. The stems are very hollow and tough. Anyways, I don't react to them. I don't know if it's like poison ivy where some people react and some people don't. I'm not sure, but if you do have it or you're going to get some, just, you know, be aware of that. Just take some caution at first. Lady's mantle is another one that's great for shade. Great border edging plant. It has, and it also blooms. It has yellow blooms that are like a chartreuse yellow. They're very nice. They make a beautiful filler with peonies, plus they have a nice scent. They will also grow in sun, and they bloom heavier when they're in sun. I don't know about full-on hot sun. They probably would need more water if you had them in full-on hot sun. I've never grown them in that kind of a setup. They will seed out. I've discovered that they will germinate in my crushed rock path, and so if you want to grow them from seed, I'm going to suggest that you grow them in some sort of a gravelly mix, because that certainly does seem to be what they like. They'll seed out all over the path, but not necessarily around the mother plant. So, and like I said, those blooms last for a long time in a vase of water, or they can also be dried. I've never dried them, but I've read that they can be dried. The next great plant for dappled shade or part shade is Martagon lilies. Now, these lilies are true Martagons, and they shouldn't be confused with the downward-facing Asiatic lilies. Martagons have long stems. They have many downward-facing flowers that bloom from the bottom up. The blooms last for quite a long time. They bloom in June. foliage, this beautiful foliage, it doesn't decline at all through the summer. They prefer dappled sun. They seem to be happy with the dry conditions that they normally have in this yard. They also didn't mind last June's drenching rains. Now, I started these Martagons from seed. It was a packet of mix pink and white, and it took about 4 to 5 years to get blooms from those seeds. But now I'm letting them naturalize, and I collect seed. I've collected seed most of the years. I let them develop seed, and then I collect it, and then I just toss the seed wherever through the flower beds, and I've moved it to, you know, another flower bed in another part of the yard, and I just keep tossing seeds wherever. There's always a great abundance of seed, so I'm never too worried. You know, what grows, grows. What doesn't, doesn't. I can recognize the first leaf that comes up. That's what happens in the first year, is just one leaf. And then the next year it is a little bit more. And finally in the 4th or 5th year, it's going to send up. It's going to have one small bloom. That bulb has to then keep increasing in size before you start getting, you know, a really big display of blooms. And it will also eventually clump up. Now, I've not ever divided a clump of these yet. I don't know if I'll have to. I do have 1 or 2 clumps that are quite large, and so we'll see. I'll wait and see if they start to decline, or which generally will happen with Asiatic lilies. When they start getting too crowded, the blooms might start getting smaller. I'll wait and see how these Martagons react, because honestly, I don't know. But Martagon lilies are a great option for a shady area, for sure. And can't forget about Bleeding Heart. That's an old standby. And I have one. Actually, I have more, but I'll tell you that story in a minute. I have one of the old-fashioned Bleeding Heart, and I really should move it because a cedar bush has encroached its territory. It kind of has moved itself a little bit more into the corner of that area. I used to have it over here, and it kind of has, you know, this part sort of died out, but it's moved itself over there. So I should move it, and I think that this is a great candidate for dry shade because, first of all, where I have it, it does have cedar roots. Cedar roots are quite shallow. It does have cedar roots all around it, sucking up moisture. Still seems to survive that just fine and keeps on blooming. I don't know in dryness if it would get the height that it can attain with proper moisture, but I do think that it's something that I will add. Maybe I'll move the one that I have. Maybe I'll move it to the back and perhaps get another 1 or 2 to see how they go. So a couple of years ago, I bought a cultivar called Gold Heart. It has yellow foliage and pink blossoms. And I can't remember if it was that year or the year after. I feel like it was the year after that I stepped on it and I broke it. Like I really broke it. I broke it off at the very base, and oh, I was so mad at myself, but I took that broken piece and I successfully re-rooted it. I went and planted it, potted it, and took care of it through the summer, and then I was able to plant a rooted cutting back into the garden. I planted it just in a little bit different area, a little bit more protected, because I wasn't sure how it was going to make it, being so newly rooted and planted, but it did make it. I saw it last year. It's growing, and what surprised me last year was that the old one that I originally stepped on and broke, and I thought it was a goner for sure, but that one is sending up some new growth as well. So maybe I have 2. They're going to be they were pretty small last year, so it's going to be a slow process, but it's better than just tossing the thing. There's another variety. It's red flowered and it has lime green foliage, and it's called Hearts of Fire, and that looks like a lovely one to try, doesn't it? I feel like this is going to find its way. If I find it, it's going to find its way into my shopping cart next year. Lamium. I think that Some people may have a love-hate relationship with Lamium or just out-and-out hate. It can be pretty aggressive, but it's a great option for ground cover in Zone 3. It just needs to be maintained or taken care of, or not let it spread much further than you want it to spread. I have this large swath of it. It goes along the hedge here, and it looks beautiful after it gets going in the spring, but it sure looks like a disaster before that. I just wait for it to grow again. It covers up the mess, and it does that quickly. I trim back the edges, and I pull out and toss whatever I don't want without a thought. I have Asiatic lilies, Hosta, and Martagon lilies that all grow through the Lamium. It doesn't seem to choke it out at all, choke out those plants at all. But overall, I think that it is a pretty good ground cover plant for Zone 3. It has nice flowers, has nice foliage, and it just needs to be held back a bit. Lamium is also deer and slug resistant. Win-win. Brunnera is also deer and slug resistant. It has these nice silvery leaves. I bought Jack Frost last year, and it went into winter looking really good, so I have high hopes. And if it survives, I'll be looking at another proven winter cultivar, the Queen of Hearts. I bought Looking Glass in 2023, and it didn't survive that first winter. Pulmonaria is also known as Lungwort, and it has these silvery spotted leaves. I have two cultivars. One is Pinka Blue, that's a proven winter variety, and the other one is Raspberry Splash, I believe. And they're doing really well. I'm quite happy with them, and I intend to either get more or divide the ones I have and move some to the back border. They do have these nice sprays of pink to blue, pinkish blue kind of flowers, and but I think again it's a foliage plant. It's kind of texture, fuzzy texture to it, and so the slugs don't like that one either, and apparently the deer don't like it. Then there's Goatsbeard, and it's a pretty substantial plant. And this is a runcus. It is not a stilby, although it looks like a stilby, and it's not false spirea, or it is Goatsbeard. And in my yard, with the blooms, it'll get to 4 or 5 feet. Now that is in this particular location, and it gets spillover from the rain barrel. If we've had lots of rain, it gets extra moisture from there. It does a great job of hiding the rain barrel from the walking path. So some years it blooms really heavy, and the bees just go crazy for this plant. And some years it also sets really heavy seed, like they just droop with the weight of the seed. So it will seed out. It takes a long time for those seeds to dry enough, and dry enough that you're able to harvest them if you want to harvest. But it's also very easy just to snip those stems off when they're done blooming, and toss them if you don't want to risk the seeding out. The ones I have are quite big. One is actually a little bit shorter because of the location it's in, but there are shorter varieties out there on the market now. One is called Goatee. The other one is called, I think it's called Fairy Hair or something like that. But they're shorter, around the 2-foot mark. So if you wanted a Goatsbeard, but you didn't want the height, those would be good contenders. They really are. I've had the one in front of the rain barrel. I think it's been there for, 20 years, easy. Perennial geranium, also called cranesbill, bloody cranesbill it's sometimes called. They're kind of a sun to shade kind of plant. I think in sun you get more blooms than you do in shade, but they grow a little taller. Some of them are quite ground hugging, some grow a little taller, but they're an option for a part shade or dappled shade area. I've added a couple. I divided a plant, I think, and I've added it a bit throughout the back border there, so we'll see how it goes. Ajuga is another ground cover. It's also called bugleweed, and it is a part shade, dappled shade kind of plant. Although I planted a bunch last year in full sun, and they really seem to enjoy it there. So, but the more they enjoy it, of course, the more they spread. So, but that's okay by me because I can dig some up and move it to the back border and see how it does there. It's I really like that plant. I like ground covers. I'd like to get into have more ground covers, just to be able to stop mulching. I would do a live mulch instead. I can't imagine weeds actually taking, being able to seed out and come up in the middle of ajuga, because it grows so thick. So yeah, a living mulch I think would be awesome out of ajuga. I bought Catlin's Giant a couple of years ago, and it's survived 2 winters now, just fine, but it's not put on a whole lot of growth, and that might be because it is planted in shade. I have a variety of primrose. It's called Primula denticulata, and it's also referred to as drumstick primrose. It's a small, dainty, pretty plant. I think it's rather short-lived, but I allow it to reseed. And I always have a nice show of flowers, and they bloom fairly early in the spring, June, I would imagine. They grow and bloom before the hostas emerge in this bed or while they're emerging, and then after the bloom is done, they all but disappear, and the hosta foliage hides them. There's also a bunch of campanula or bellflower that is supposed to grow well in part shade. I have planted a peach leaf bellflower. It's called Tachyon Blue, and I have put it back there. We're going to see how it does. I also have seed for a carpet bellflower. It's called Clockwise Blue, and at the back it says full sun to part shade. It's supposed to get 6 inches tall, tiny flowers on miniature plants. So I'm going to give that a whirl, and I will probably plant some in full sun along the in the rock garden area, and some in part shade. There's some other plants that can be grown in shade to part shade, but I won't be adding them to the back border. Now, one of those is daylilies, and I actually have daylilies. I've had many daylilies in that back border when it was a sun border. But as it became shadier, I noticed that the daylilies were blooming less and less. So I have been moving them out. I maybe still have a few left in there that are still seem to be getting enough sun, enough full-on sun that they're blooming. But my experience, I have a lot of daylilies, and my experience is that they need quite a bit of sun to put on a nice bloom. Columbine is a shade-tolerant plant. I have a love-hate relationship with this plant. I actually have, this is Aquilegia. I actually have a packet of seeds that I bought last year, I guess. I'm not sure why I did, given that I have this love-hate relationship. It's easy to grow. They're known for powdery mildew, which mine get. And they're known to get leaf miner, which mine get. And now there's also this fly, a sawfly, that just eats all the foliage, and it just leaves bare stems. It doesn't kill the plant, but it just looks like twigs. And so it's easy to grow, but it has a lot of things that have to be overcome as well. There's a green and white variegated ground cover plant, and that is goutweed. And most gardeners either fear it or curse it. It's pretty aggressive. It's actually on the province of Ontario's invasive list. Now, I think most plants have a purpose somewhere. Sometimes it's not the best place for it. If you were to plant this alongside of lawn, you might have a tough time because it will grow out into the lawn. It spreads all kinds of ways, I guess, by seed and by runners, and it'll travel, and it'll live anywhere. It'll live in sun and shade and drought and wet and bogs, and it'll survive nuclear war. But I once saw a planting of it. I saw a friend who has a garden. She has a lot of evergreen trees, and the goutweed was planted as a ground cover underneath there, and it was really stunning. There were a few other plants in there as well, but mostly it was the goutweed. It really was very stunning. I don't know how much it took for them to keep it contained, but it really was beautiful. So what have I missed? Let me know in the comments. Maybe there's something out there that I really need to get to add to the back border for a dry dappled shade area. So thanks for watching today. I hope you found it informative or helpful in some way. And you know, I just want to say you guys are great. You've all been so supportive of me and Andy and I while we navigate our way through filming and editing and cameras and lighting and YouTube in general. And so you probably have no idea how much that support really means. I do appreciate it. So as always, if you did enjoy the video, give me a thumbs up, tell your friends, and hit that subscribe button. See you again soon. Bye.